When we talk about the word icons and iconic, we tend to think of a visual representation. The Taj Mahal, the Empire State Building, iconic buildings we can tell from the silhouette. The Fender Stratocaster guitar, the Rolex Submariner. Just by the outline, the silhouette of these things, we know that they're iconic designs. Well, when it comes to cars, can you think of three more iconic shapes than these? The Porsche 911, the Ford GT40 and a Series 2 Land Rover. Welcome to another edition of Electric Icons. Welcome to the world of Everrati, and as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we go on to this week's Electric Icons episode, where we look at the world of Everrati, it's that time when I do ask you to make sure that you subscribe to the AutoEV channel. Make sure you press the little bell button down below, because that way you'll be notified of when our next video goes live. And if you do like what we do, make sure you give us a bit of a thumbs up as well and leave some of your comments down below. Now, Everrati. What are Everrati? Well, they are a company, and they are, well, unashamedly a tech company that's reimagining iconic cars for future generations. The 911, the Porsche 911. If you've been a YouTube regular, no doubt you'll have seen the car covered by many other people, but it's not just this car that they build. They are turning their attention to icons such as the Series 2 Land Rover and even the Ford GT40, the Le Mans winning GT40. But is it right what they're doing? Should they be tampering with these iconic classics and making them, well, electric? Well, let's take a deeper dive and find out. Now, no doubt if you are a frequent user of YouTube, you'll have seen plenty of videos of the Everrati 911. But it's also important to discuss what else they do, which is this, a Series 2 Land Rover. Again, an iconic car, an iconic classic car. Now, plenty of people have done resto mods on Defenders and put big V8s in them and made them do 0 to 60 in ridiculous times. That's not what Everrati are doing with this Land Rover. That's not their essence at all. They're keeping the originality, the essence of that Land Rover here with its mechanical setup. It's 4-wheel drive, it has twin motors, but it's not doing a silly 0 to 60 time. I mean, it's dropped from something like 23 seconds to about 13 seconds. But what they want to do is keep the originality of a Series 2 Land Rover, but give it a modern twist. And that really is the essence of what Everrati is about. Now, we're going to be talking to Justin Lunny, the CEO of the company, just to find out a little bit more about why they do what they do and how they do it. So we're joined now by Justin Lunny, founder and CEO of Everrati. Justin, first of all, thank you ever so much for having us here today and sampling the delights of your company, of which it has been fun, shall we say.
Fantastic, good to hear.
Obviously, there's people who are used to YouTube will have seen the 911 because obviously that's the thing. But as I say, it's not just the 911 that Everrati are doing. What was your ethos? How did it come about? How did Everrati start? Why did you start it? And why have you chosen the cars you've chosen?
Great question. So yeah, I mean, my background is a petrol head through and through. So I'm reforming, I think it's fair to say, petrol head. Always loved cars. You know, I was the kid in the back of my dad's car at a very young age. always looking at cars, naming them by their headlights in the dark. So that was me. I spent the last 15 years in the tech industry, and saw how tech was developing, both in terms of fintech, my background, but also clean technologies and EV and everything around it. And really, having sold a couple of businesses, thought, well, how can I develop and follow my passion, which is cars, also technology, but more importantly for many of us now is sustainability and clean air. So that was really important for me. As it happens, my daughter, who is now 11, around the age of 7 or 8, had started really worrying about climate change. And it kind of coincided with selling one of my companies. And this has just kind of come out of really the passion for doing that, and hopefully allowing people like my children's generation to drive these beautiful cars in the future. Because if we don't do this, they will no longer be on the road.
I think that's a really key point you make. I mean, I'm a father myself, and I think that's a really interesting point. You know, what we don't want to do is for us to look back and reminisce of what they've missed out on, which maybe sometimes people of our generation do. You know, we missed out on a few things back then, maybe from the music world,
That's
with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and such like. So it's important for you, obviously, to preserve these cars in such a way. Now, say you started showcasing Everrati really with the 911.
Porsche. Yeah.
And what was the reason for choosing the 911 as your sort of like showcase car?
So a lot of these things are personal, aren't they? So I happened to, that one of my bedroom wall cars probably as a kid was an earlier version of this. I think the wide body car is just incredible. But I think a couple of things really. First of all, the way we go about our transformations and redefining a car means that if we get it right on something like a 911, we're going to get it right on other vehicles as well. So it's very much about a statement car, a car that, 911s have been tweaked and have been deployed and kind of enjoyed by many, many generations. And for me, it's a beautiful car. It's the right size, it's the right shape, it's the right feel for a driver's car. And really that's what we're all about, is redefining these cars in the modern world to be as good as they were, but hopefully enjoyed in a way that they would never have been before.
And how do you take, so something like a 911, which, let's be honest with you, is not the way you would design a car if you were to start with a clean sheet of paper. You've got the engine way out the back, the weight distribution's all wrong, but it's become such a part of sort of like motoring folklore that sort of like 911, the way that it's distributed its weight, the way that it's rear engine, and Porsche haven't changed it. You haven't changed it either, because you've kept the weight distribution pretty much identical. How do you go about transforming it from a petrol engined car to an EV and still have the same feel of a 911?
Yeah, and it's all about weight, it's about balance. So essentially we'll take, any project we do, we take an original vehicle, so whether it's the Porsche or some of the others that we're now working on, and we go through pains to essentially weigh the original vehicle. So we corner weight it so we know exactly where the weight was. We don't just look at stats online around weight distribution, we actually weigh the car.
You do it yourself, yeah.
We do it ourselves. We then carefully remove the powertrain on all the vehicles. We 3D scan the space, and then our designers essentially design a brand new powertrain for that vehicle on CAD. Depending on what components are available, so new batteries, motors, power electronics, and where we can fit those within the space. Because really importantly for us, we don't cut the chassis, we don't cut the body. Wherever we can, we make sure that it's entirely reversible, because to us the car is the star, we're just giving them a new future. So we go through that entire process. Once we're comfortable, we test, and then we essentially sign it off as a car. Once we've done that, it's then available for people to replicate. So essentially we do all of the work up front, and you'll have seen, I'm sure, some of the reviews we've had, which essentially are saying that this vehicle now is virtually identical weight balance. Yes, it's more powerful, and we could go higher, but we've actually kept it to a point where we believe it's safe and suitable for the vehicle, and then we can replicate these for any customers that want a 964, and we're doing that already for a number of people around the world.
I think one of the things that I found interesting in visiting you today is the Land Rover. Now, what's interesting is there's a lot of people who have done, we've talked before about the kind of resto mod seen on the 911s, and I genuinely do believe that you do deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as people like Gunther Works and Singer, because the amount of engineering that goes into that I think is incredible. And as I say, you've maintained what the core essence of the 911 is about. But this is a completely different beast,
It
this
is.
Series 2 Land Rover. And what I found quite interesting is you could have gone down the route of putting a 500 brake horsepower motor in it. You could have gone down the route of people like Bowler or
Absolutely.
Twisted, but you haven't. Why did you decide to keep this?
Yeah, great question.
The core question of,
Yeah.
sorry, the core of a Land Rover.
The team that we have here, so my team is really all ex-OEM grade engineers. They are people that have developed vehicles, brand new vehicles, to tolerances and to performance standards that were set out. This vehicle, and in fact pretty much any Land Rover other than very modern ones, were designed for a certain power. You know, they weren't designed for ridiculous EV power. You'd have to upgrade pretty much everything else on the vehicle to take that. And the whole point of these is people love them for what they are. They've got the idiosyncrasies. They've got, you know, the fact is that it's a cool vehicle. It's a vehicle for your, whether it's your trip down to the pub or your private estate or your beach house. It's not for tearing around a runway. So this is very much about keeping the essence of that vehicle. My history with this vehicle happens to be when I was a kid. Again, my uncle had one on a farm in Ireland. I vividly remember going up the side of a mountain, almost falling out one of the doors that don't quite shut. So it means a lot to me that we keep these as beautifully restored vehicles and upgrade them and redefine them for the modern world. So that's really what we're all about.
I think it's an interesting juxtaposition to see how Land Rover, who spent years and years and years thinking how they can modernise the Defender, and have gone very modern with their Defender, you know, moved so far away from what the core of Defender is. You've taken what the essence of the original Land Rover was and modernised it in a very different way by putting an EV powertrain in it. And I think, as you say, you're kind of future-proofing these cars for future generations. Where's the future of Everrati going? Where are you going now? What's the next steps for you guys?
So the essence of the company is we are all about high-quality engineered vehicles, but really we're a tech company. So my background being in tech, and essentially where we're going with that is to develop our own multiple platforms. So you've seen some of them here. So you see the Porsche, you've seen the GT40, and indeed the Land Rover. But in essence, those are platforms. So you take a four-wheel drive platform, you take a mid-engine rear drive. We're working on our front-engine rear drive platform at the moment as well. And what that means is that we can start to look at a multitude of different iconic cars that we want to develop over time, both for ourselves but also for other people. So for example, there are circumstances where an existing ICE manufacturer who has, you know, probably got very limited shelf life unless they have an EV powertrain. We're starting to look at projects like that for other people and really develop out the technologies, develop out the IP that we have internally, and grow the business in that way, so that, you know, it's not just folk in the UK that can enjoy these beautiful vehicles, but actually around the world.
Interesting. I think what today's shown us, as I say, I think when people look at the YouTube space and they've seen the 911 obviously up until now, which looks beautiful. By the way, explain to me the Gulf connection. I mean, I can't understand this juxtaposition of
It is.
Gulf oil on an EV.
It is.
How did that come about?
So look, we were approached by Gulf themselves. So we have connections in that business, and a great brand, as I'm sure you'll realise. Again, very, very iconic, both in terms of race and in terms of the blue and orange stripes. But essentially, Gulf themselves are moving into a clean air, clean energy business, as are all oil companies, I'm sure you're aware. So Gulf themselves, really, we've worked to develop the brand into that space. So they're doing their own clean energy solutions. They have an electric car charging business now, for example. Okay. You'll start to see, I'm sure, Gulf liveried electric car chargers if you so wish. We also happen to use, however, their EV cooling fluids within our vehicles as well. So that's the other connectivity there. And they've been a great partner, and it's really fun when you turn up to a charging station in a Gulf liveried 911. You really do get people who said you can't park there, and then within seconds, as soon as you charge it, you know, it becomes a talking point. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Now, the future in terms of Everrati, as I say, we've we've touched on the GT40, which obviously is your next project. That is slightly different because you're not taking an existing car.
That's right.
Your partnerships there, am I right in thinking, is Superformance?
That's right.
That have the license to build modern GT4,
Exactly.
or the toolroom copies, if you like, or
Precisely.
the license. Tell us a little bit more about the GT40 project. How's that coming about?
So this really, I suppose, is our demonstration of the fact that we are leading the space, I think, in EV development for retro cars. And what I mean by that is that this is not a brand new car. We're using the existing chassis. It happens to be a brand new existing chassis, but it is the shape of the original. We're using brand new integral powertrain motors that were used in the Neo EP9. They're also used in the Volkswagen IDR. So the leaders really in their field. But what this is really showing, I hope our customers, both commercial and indeed end customers, is that we have the skills in-house to develop very, very high levels of performance and engineering in these cars. This one happens to have twin 400 horsepower, 400 bhp and newton meters of torque motors, so 800 in total. Brand new Hewland transmissions. It's a 700 volt architecture. It really is the pinnacle of this particular market that we're in.
You're showing what's achievable.
That's right.
And as I say, I think that's the interesting part with that. You're taking something as iconic as these three cars, especially a GT40, and turning it into sort of like a modern, usable performance car.
That's exactly right.
Justin, thank you ever so much for your time today. Thanks for allowing us to come and sample these delights.
Absolute pleasure.
I hope we're invited back to drive the GT40
and many more to come. Yeah, no, we'd love to have you back.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Now the Everrati 911 develops 500 brake horsepower, which is considerably more than the donor car would have developed when it was new, at just over 260 horsepower. And of course, this weighs less. 500 horsepower, let me put that in context, that's the same as a new 911 GT3, which weighs more than this car, which means that it has a punch like, well, Will Smith on Oscars night. But whilst they've removed the heart of the 911, whilst they've taken away that sense of there's no air-cooled flat six behind me, what remains is pure 911, and that is the essence of what makes Everrati so special. They've left everything else intact. They've left it all feeling like a 911. Combative on the road, haphazard ergonomics, that compact nature. And I like that, because I like a 911. I like a proper old school 911, and that's what this is, just with a big modern twist to it. Now, you can have various different things in here in terms of the options on the suspension and such like. We've got such things as adjustability down here, which I can change. I can change the front and rear suspension, the roll and the pitch of the car, which is quite nice because it gives you another element of the vehicle to play with. It gives you another element of the dynamics that you can change around. But the whole feeling of this is, well, yeah, this is a really well engineered piece of kit. It's difficult to convey how odd it feels driving an air-cooled 911 without that air-cooled noise coming from behind me. The steering, well, the steering is beautifully weighted, I have to say. It's one of my favourite things about this car, is how the steering feels. It has a really nice weight to it, and the weight distribution of the Everrati is exactly like it was in the Porsche. 40% front, 60% rear bias, and you can feel that through the chassis. And despite the sort of slightly wider track of this 911, it feels good, it feels planted, and it feels like you could also actually do quite a trip in this car, because there's an element of refinement about it, because, as I say, whilst yes, it's got the upright screen and there's a bit more wind noise about it than you might get, that was exactly like the 911s of this era. It's no different. This car feels like a proper tribute to everything that we love about the 911. I'm going to mention people like Singer, Gunther Works, because that's kind of where Everrati are at with this car. It is a resto mod with an electric twist, and that's a good thing. Now, whilst this car has been covered quite extensively by some of our competitor channels, it is worthwhile talking about it, because it's the level of detail and engineering that goes into the Everratis that's really impressed us. Not only do they 3D scan the whole car once they sort of take the drivetrain out, so they maximise the sort of like weight distribution the best way, but they go to such a degree in terms of the build and the construction to keep that weight down. You've got a carbon fibre front bonnet, we've got carbon front wings on this car, carbon roof and carbon doors, as well as the wider track at the back as well, which gives it that lovely kind of 911 feel. Now, not only about in terms of its construction, but also the way it's finished is what's impressive in here. Now, this car comes complete with not only the Gulf livery and the houndstooth interior, but just look at the fit and finish of this boot space in here. The level of detail in the Everrati is what impresses. You've got your interior that flows in here, you've got a useful luggage space here, as well as some of the electrical architecture within the car here. Now that's lovely and that's all fantastic, and this is a very expensive motor car. Now, in terms of the battery, you're looking at 53 kilowatt hour battery in the car, which should give a range, according to Everrati, of up to about 150 miles, probably ideal for a blast down to Goodwood. The Land Rover is slightly different, because okay, it is a Series 2 Land Rover. It's not got any composite panels, it is a proper old Land Rover. But again, it's the fit and finish. Now, this is a 60 kilowatt hour battery, and this comes in 3 modules. And this should give a range of around about 150 miles as well. But of course, the way you're going to use this car is going to be very different to the way you would use the 911. This isn't a car you're going to take on a long journey. It is more about pottering around your country estate or going around West London or the little country lanes. 150 miles in a Land Rover Series 2, well, that's going to see you with a couple of weeks worth of use, I would suggest. But of course, as impressive as the 911 and Defender is, it is this one that I'm really looking forward to most driving, especially with 700 brake horsepower at its disposal. Yeah, let's hope the invite for this comes soon. A company like Everrati is future-proofing these icons for the next generation. Oh, don't get me wrong, they're not going to appeal to everyone. There's going to be an element of you out there who say, well, why would you strip the heart out of something like a Porsche 911 and replace it with something as sterile, so clinical as an electric motor? But to those people, I would say this. What it does do is it brings in other sensory enjoyments that we get from these cars, the way they handle, the way they feel around us. And they deliver that without giving us the guilt, without making our conscience feel bad. And remember, as we've said, this is all reversible. But what it does is it makes sure that these cars are being future-proofed. And for that, we must celebrate it. Thank you ever so much for watching another edition of Electric Icons, and thank you for tuning in to AutoEV again. Please remember, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the little like button down below, and make sure you've pressed the bell button so you receive notification of when our next video goes live. Remember, we are on all social media, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn, so please go and give us a follow over there. And if you like what you've seen in this episode, there's plenty more to indulge yourself with by sticking on our YouTube channel, as well as road test reviews, van reviews and even more from our Electric Icon series. But until next time, thank you ever so much for watching. We'll see you soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.